Welcome back to another episode of Disney Unpacked. It's me, Len Testa, and this, if you can believe it, is the 10th and final episode of Season 1 of this series. We've covered a lot of Disney history in this first season, but before we get started on Season 2, I need a break.
Whoa, not so fast there, Len. I mean, you can't go on break until both you and Jim Hill answer one question.
One question. Yeah, that doesn't sound ominous at all, Jim. All right, what's the question?
Oh, it's simple enough. I mean, I'll be asking it at the end of today's program.
Is this going to take long? Like Mr. Testa, Nancy and I already have vacation plans. And Nancy's packed the car. As soon as we get done here, we're headed for the beach.
Ooh, what an amazing coincidence. I mean, because on today's Disney Unpacked, we're going to be discussing Pixar Pier, that part of Disney's California adventure that once upon a time was called Golden Beaches.
Au contraire, Mr. Shull. That's not what Pixar Pier's name used to be. The original name for this part of DCA was, of course, Paradise Pier, and I have the pressed penny to prove it.
But I'm talking about the name the Imagineers first proposed for the seaside district.
Wait a minute. You're calling the land a district? I mean, I'm assuming it's an improvement on activation, but district?
Well, okay.
This is where the script goes out the window when I start ad-libbing.
That's all right. Well, activation district. Look, Len, he's not wrong. Back when California Adventure first opened, that was the plan. The Imagineers deliberately designed this theme park to be different from Disneyland. This new park didn't have lands. It would have districts.
Okay, what's the difference then between a land and a district?
Well, it's really simple, easy peasy. The difference is the DCA would have no berms or visual separation between the different areas. Whereas Disneyland, the place we know and love, they had clear separation between all their lands. The decision for DCA was to have visual bleed, to allow visual bleed, meaning that wherever you stood, you could look into any other part of the park. There was nothing to block your view, which told people immediately that DCA was going to be playing by different rules.
Okay, I'm with you so far on that.
Well, good, because the different rules meant that when you were inside of DCA, the outside world would just bleed in on you. You could see everything. And this impacted directly the stories that this park was going to tell.
Oh, that's super interesting. Okay, I didn't know about that, but all right, go ahead. Let's go back and talk about districts in DCA where, what was the name again?
Oh, you mean Golden Beaches.
Golden Beaches. Is that really the name? Because it sounds like an Estelle Getty vehicle. Was this the part of DCA where Disney guests were going to hang out with Dorothy, Blanche, Rose, and Sophia and eat cheesecake?
What? I don't follow you.
Golden Girls. Len is very into television from the 70s and the 80s. Please don't get him started on Love Boat.
Oh, Love Boat. Love, exciting and new. All right.
And I thought my head was full of useless trivia.
And now you know better.
Well, it is episode 10. But anyway, ignoring that for a moment, back to when the Imagineers were first developing Golden Beaches for California Adventure. They wanted it to be exciting and new also. And so they opted to go with a very much more contemporary take on this area's theme.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading something to this effect when California Adventure was first announced back in July of 96. How the beachy section of this theme park was supposed to have things like street artists, musicians, and mimes, not to mention skateboarders and street lugers who perform extreme sports while guests watched surfers catching waves out on Paradise Bay.
This sounds more like modern day Venice Beach than what opened at DCA back in, what was it, 2001?
DCA was supposed to be Disney's very first contemporary theme park. I mean, it wasn't set in a time. It was going to be new and hip and, with it. It was going to be of its time. But however, when it opened, the Walt Disney Company suddenly discovered that guests really didn't dig that. They didn't want something different at all. They really, really liked Disneyland. They wanted that across the Esplanade.
So is that what we're going to talk about today? How Paradise Pier became Pixar Pier?
Indeed we are.
All right, so let's start with the obvious here. Disney had to know. They had to know that a theme park built around the idea of California was not going to excite people who actually lived in California, right? I mean, if those people wanted an authentic California experience, they could walk out in their backyard and see grizzly bears and Sonny Bono and whatever, right?
Your backyard is very different from my backyard, Len.
I'm just saying it's more colorful, right? But putting on my touring plans hat, right? I know because I have access to the data. Like 70% of the people who visit Disneyland are coming into Disneyland from less than 100 miles away.
Len, let's face it. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you can pour down your gullet. The fact is that nobody who creates or operates a theme park like DCA wants it to fail. And so people sincerely, really, really want it to work, and they put a lot of things to make it work. However, the fact is people kept voting with their feet. They wanted to be at Disneyland, not a DCA. And so suddenly people finally acknowledged that what was needed to fix DCA was change, epic change, global change on a scale that the Walt Disney Company had never, ever done before. What they were going to have to do is not close an existing theme park because that wasn't an option. They were going to have to change an existing operating theme park with guests in it.
It sounds like they're adopting Dean Martin's philosophy here. If booze doesn't solve your problem, the checkbook will. Was he talking? What was he talking about there? Was he talking about people problems, ex-wives? We don't know, but it's still words to live by.
I love Dino as much as the next guy, and Dino, if he'd been here, he would have been clear as well. He might have been a little red-eyed, but he would have been clear-eyed. Because he was realizing he would have voted along with the guests that they really wanted that second gate to be like Disneyland, a park with the same charming qualities that Disneyland had, along with a genuine sense of time and place.
Okay, so this sounds like a huge remodel, Jim Shull. And I've been through a house remodel before, and I know no matter what you budget and what you schedule, it's always more than what you think is going to cost and take longer.
You and me both, brother. I've gone through a couple of remodels, and I don't want to do it again.
But just to be clear here, you guys got $1.1 billion to do this.
$1.1 billion? Not me personally, but, and if I did, don't tell my wife. But I hear what you're saying here. I hear what you're saying.
How much time did you get, Jim Shull?
5 years, Len. Nearly 5 long years.
And the park was a construction zone for all of that? I mean, I remember running the Disneyland half marathon through the construction walls of DCA, and it was the strangest running experience I've ever had. All we ran through for DCA was past these large construction walls. But let me ask you this question: why didn't you just shut the park down and get it done faster?
Well, that's beyond my pay grade to make that decision. But remember this: even as it stood, DCA was pulling millions of guests through its entrance gates every day.
And they're also coming to Grand Californian Hotel and Downtown Disney, both of which are tied to DCA.
Fair. Okay, so closing the park isn't an option. What was your plan? What could you do?
Well, DCA had to be rebuilt on the installment plan, zone by zone, construction walls moving constantly. The ones you walked and ran by, the ones we drove by, the ones that guests walked through. The entrance to the park itself changed 3 separate times.
But again, you still had $1.1 billion for this transformation.
And that money went a long, long way. But it just wasn't enough to deliver on every single idea that we had. I mean, remember when we 3 visited Walt Disney Presents over there at the Disney Hollywood Studios in Orlando, and we stood around the Paradise Pier 2.0 concept model? Remember that day?
Yeah, I loved it because you got to point out all the things that didn't get built, and that was kind of cool.
That was like, what was it? The Disney Villains Funhouse and the new Carousel Pavilion, the cover for the queue of the Sunwheel. Wasn't there also going to be a version of California Screamin' that was going to be totally rethemed around the Disney villains?
And that all would have been possible if we'd had all the money in the world. But the reality is we didn't have all the money in the world. And the reality was that Cars Land and Buena Vista Streets, we knew were going to consume the bulk of that $1 billion plus. Paradise Pier 2.0 had a very big and adequate budget, but we had to be smart on how and where we spent the money. We had to fix what was broken, not what we wanted to do.
Okay, but Jim, if Cars Land and Buena Vista Street are going to take the bulk of your budget, you've still got to uplift all of the things that were already in the park. How do you go about making those kinds of decisions about what gets upgraded and how?
Well, just like a Mikado, I make a little list.
All right.
Do you remember the Orange Stinger, Len?
Oh yeah. That was the spinner ride hidden inside a giant orange, right?
Yeah,
I remember the ride.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Our ode to Florida.
But remember, DCA once the land it's at on it once be Sistersfield, and I actually enjoyed the early original version of this ride when it was the Orange Stinger, well, the one where when you sat down in your chair, you looked as though you had a giant bee butt.
Ooh, we'll talk about we'll talk about it another time. But you must have really enjoyed it while you had it, because the bee butts got retired early after the ride opened. There was a little problem with that. The bee butts were nice, but the free hanging chairs that the bee butts were attached to, they'd swing back and forth, and eventually you had cracked bee butts.
I love the idea that somewhere in the Disney warehouses are the unbroken bee butts, just waiting for some sort of last minute sale.
Yeah, well, D23 is coming up. Maybe you can put a word in.
Okay, but in addition to the bee butts, Jim Shull, wasn't there also orange citrus smell? Isn't that right?
Yeah, we used the smelleryzer technology from Epcot.
And I am super excited about that. I've told you my story about how I acquired some of the Epcot orange scent. But what happened to that?
Well, the problem is, when you can contain a scent inside of an Epcot pavilion, it's contained inside of a building. When you project the scent out into the air of Anaheim, it just goes into the atmosphere and the smog and pretty much wasted. So as a result, it only lasted a couple of months. But
that's a bummer.
Yeah, tell me about it. There's a lot of stuff next to the bee bite. There's a whole gallon of smell somewhere. Air freshener, maybe. Anyway, long story short, before we digress further, the problem with the Stinger really kind of was, in my opinion, was the massive fiberglass skin that surrounded the ride. I mean, from a distance, it looked like a giant orange, and it was fantastic. But the problem with the downside is it broke all the rules of Disney park playing, because it hid the kinetic. When the ride was in motion, it was active and kinetic and beckoning. By putting the giant orange peel around it, it hid everything from view.
So you're telling me that you made the Stinger more appealing by peeling the orange?
Well, yeah. After we peeled the orange, we added a little Mickey to the mix. And I got to add him and other classic Disney characters. Because remember, one of the things that we heard, again, one of the operating lessons was Disney guests said, we want this to be like Disneyland. And what's more Disney than Mickey Mouse? So by putting him on the ride and making that ride about him, then we tick those boxes off.
All right, Jim Shull, is there anything else we need to cover? Because the clock is ticking for Jim Hill to start his vacation.
Oh, there are a few more stories about the roof of Ariel's grotto being repainted. There's also the dad joke puns being retired throughout Paradise Pier.
You didn't mention The Little Mermaid, Ariel's Undersea Adventure, or The World of Color, show stages out on the bay.
All right, well, let's save those stories for another season. Vacation time is about to start, and I've got to make time for that.
I'm fine with that. I can wait.
But guys, there's still another version of the pier that we need to talk about. The version of the pier that the show is actually all about, and that's Pixar Pier.
How could we have forgotten? Oh, yeah. We got to get to that. The reason for the show.
Fair enough. All right, California is always reinventing itself. Go ahead, tell me more.
Okay, so here we go. The company looked to bring even more character branding into its parks at that time, not just in DCA, not just in Disneyland, but everywhere. And so the decision was to bring more of the Pixar characters into what was Paradise Pier and transform it into Pixar Pier. The change would be limited to the area from the pier entrance all the way around to the very far edge of the coaster.
Interesting. So not all of Paradise Pier was transformed, only a part.
Yes, and the get out of jail free card was that the part not changed was renamed Paradise Gardens.
All right. So first piece of the Pixar Pier puzzle actually happened years earlier when Toy Story Midway Mania opened July 2012, which was a month after the Florida version of that same attraction opened at Hollywood Studios.
Ooh, and don't forget the third version of Mania that opened at Tokyo Disney Sea, which opened on July 9th, 2012. And for that version, it's set in Toyville Park, based on Victorian trolley parks that were common more than 100 years ago. They did a fantastic job. They stayed in an era because they were in the American waterfront in Tokyo.
I mean, it is evocative of a place and a time. I'll give you that.
Oh, and don't be scared of the giant Woody's face you have to go through. That mouth doesn't bite.
It's a little too late to say don't be scared. Okay.
I was going to say that ship has sailed. But really nice dental work here. That's fantastic. All right.
Indeed they are.
All right. I get that Toy Story Mania was first, but what came next?
Okay. Well, when the three of us walked around Paradise Pier back in March on that slightly soggy day, what I remember were the ride shows and attractions. They keyed off of some of Pixar's biggest hits, movies like Toy Story, Inside Out, and The Incredibles. But there was also things in the land that were really deep cuts into that animation studio's catalog, stuff that only Pixar super fans would recognize.
Care to share an example with the class, Mr. Hill?
Poultry Palace. That's the quick service dining location in the Toy Story Boardwalk area. And what's fun about that for the super crazy Pixar fans is this is the restaurant that you saw in Small Fry. That was the Toy Story tune that went out in theaters in November 2011, along with the Muppet movie. And what's kind of cool about Poultry Palace, the building, is it's shaped to look like this giant Happy Meal box.
The box is indeed cool. I'll give you points for that. Is there anything else on your list you'd want to share?
The candy shop Bing Bong sweet stuff. Again, back to things that are slightly horrifying. I mean, they had that the Bing Bong behind the counter. Remember in the movie, whenever he cried, candy shot out of his eyes, and that's what's behind the cash wrap.
I saw the display too, and the message I got was that from that was, "Here, kids, eat my tears."
People see what they want to see there, Len.
I don't know. That's pretty explicit there, Jim. I don't think there's a lot of interpretation there.
But anyway, right there next to Bing Bong are the games at Pixar Pier. And that hosts the same exact setup as the games of the Boardwalk, except now 3 of the 4 games are changed over to feature Pixar characters. Can you name them?
Yeah, well, now hang on. Used to be Goofy About Fishing, Casey at the Bat, and Dumbo Bucket Brigade. Those were pulled out and replaced by La Luna, Starcatcher, the Wall-E Space Race, and Heimlich's Candy Corn Toss, which...
Heimlich.
Yeah, there we go.
There's also Bullseye Styling Stampede. That did make it over. It survived DCA 2.0, and it remained. But Gooftopf Tinkerschmidt, he moved off the pier. And according to the story, he sold his Paradise Pier amusement company. Anyway, long story short, moving on. King's Triton's Carousel of the Sea opened in 2001, and it remained the same until Pixar Pier. It was changed out because now guests are greeted by a giant-sized Jessie, which so happens to be the exact same figure created to stand at the entrance of Toy Story Land Shanghai Disneyland. Waste not, want not is my motto.
Well, but at the same time, you bring the new, that figure from Shanghai, but where folks previously, when they rode the King Triton version of this carousel, they rode on sea creatures. They now ride on brand new sculpted toy critters, right? I have to say, I love that, but I do miss the plaques that used to be up on the carousel's awning that paid tribute to a lot of, California's famous amusement piers that have, long since closed.
I can't disagree, but you come to a fork in the road when you make decisions in design. And as great as those plaques were that honored old classic California amusement piers, they just didn't fit on Pixar Pier, so they had to come down. But don't forget, steps away is Pixar's Pal Around. That's the former Mickey's Fun Wheel, which was the former Sun Wheel. I mean, it had a lot of identities. It got around. For that version, the wheel received new paint, new sign, new vehicle graphics. Otherwise, it's the same classic ride that it's been since 2001. Right down to Mickey's face on the wheel.
Okay, so let me ask this question. The ride's name is the Pixar Pal Around, but Mickey Mouse is the biggest thing on the wheel. I thought you guys were very consistent in stories. Like, isn't that supposed to be important to Imagineering? How did this happen?
Well, we pride ourselves on being consistently inconsistent. Len, you know that every single Disney park has a recognizable icon. I mean, you step into a park and you see Spaceship Earth, you're in Epcot. You see Mickey's face on the wheel, and by now, after several years, you're in DCA. And basically become branded into the guest memory. And by that time, therefore, changing that face was too late.
Mm-hmm. All right. So continuing, getting back to our tour that day, that rainy day when we walk around the pier, I have to admit, I really enjoyed our time spinning the giant granite Pixar ball. That was a fun discovery and to be honest, a nice bit of exercise. I
think we also made a Sisyphus joke as well on that, which was, throwing in some Greek mythology. No, the thing I loved about this for our viewers who haven't seen this, it's a huge, solid granite ball that's going to be, 4 or 5 feet in diameter, right, Shull?
Yeah, and how many tons you might imagine it would be. It's
solid, right? But you can push it around because it's floating on this incredibly thin layer of water, like a super, super thin film of water. And so the pressure on it has to be immense, to float the ball. But you can push it around. It's kind of great.
It is, but again, you talk about the exercise the 3 men got.
Yeah, it took us a while to push it around, yeah.
Yeah, but remember that there was probably an 8-year-old girl who walked in behind us and she just put her hand and started spinning it wildly.
Yeah, Joe, we're not gonna talk about that on the show.
Anyway, regardless of whether you're an 8-year-old or 3 men, it's little moments like that that complement the e-ticket coaster that opened as California Screaming way back in 2001 and reopened as the Incredicoaster with Pixar Pier. Here, a story was added to the existing coaster with character figures, lighting, extended sound tubes, and a new soundtrack.
Again, what kind of intrigued me, at the very end of that ride, the coaster track circles this vacant piece of land that is still, to this day, reserved for a future ride. That's been a promise since, the DCA Preview Center, back when it overlooked the parking lot under construction.
Yeah, true. And may I live so long to see something someday on that little patch of sand. I mean, the feral cats love it, but they look at it as the world's largest litter box.
Okay. Okay. You were talking earlier about little moments, but you forgot to mention the animated Luxo figure over the entrance arch into Pixar Pier.
Right. Yeah, because you pointed this out to us, Jim, when we were walking through it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. How could I forget that one? And that figure is very similar to the Luxo Junior electric figure that was installed at Pixar Place in Disney's California studios. The one that was down that pathway when they had to walk down when Toy Story Mania's entrance was down there.
Okay, so looks like we're now finally coming to an end of our walk around Pixar Pier. Before we end, I want to say, again, I thought they did a really good job with the food locations that were then added as part of the Pixar Pier transformation of Paradise Pier. The things like the Lamplighter Lounge, Jack Jack Cookies Num Nums. We already talked about Poultry Palace, but Angry Dogs. And then there is the adorable Snowman Frosted Treats.
I love this one, Jim, because you somehow opened a snow cone shop that sells yellow snow cones.
Well, nobody said no.
I'd love to hear about how you got that past whatever approval board you needed to.
Well, that's a story for another time, and it involves somebody who had to sign off who may have been colorblind. Oh. But no Thai tuna rolls were involved.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I could talk about this stuff all day. How much time do you have? Oh, wait. You said something earlier about vacation?
Yes, vacation now. Talk later.
Okay then. So making time here, the very last thing we have to talk about is the ride that opened at Pixar Pier after the official opening.
Oh, okay. So you got to be talking about Inside Out Emotional Whirlwind.
Yeah, remember that ride I said became your soda can? The old Maliboomer. Well, when that was torn down, it was a vacant pad, and it was a pad that was vacant for years. But finally, its time came because when they went to build Avengers Campus, they had to close and demolish Flick's Fun Fair. And with that, the old Flick's Fire ride, well, it needed a home.
Now, I heard Disneyland Resort managers were insistent that any and all attractions for the Pixar Pier area, again, had to be tied to Pixar IP. But since the film Inside Out had been popular, it just made sense to take flyers and transform that out. Though, wasn't the original name for this thing supposed to be Inside Out Mood Swings?
Okay, true story. When I got to sponsor my daughter's softball team when she was like 10, I called them the Mood Swings.
I love the name, but the story I also heard here was that Disney didn't want to offend anybody who was genuinely struggling with depression, so Mood Swing just wasn't going to fly.
Or swing.
There we go.
But anyway, regardless of the potential name change or why it happened or didn't happen, the ride was rebuilt. And so back to the European vendor it went, back into a crate, stamped, returned to Zamperla, and they redid it, and it returned back to DCA as Inside Out Emotional Whirlwind.
Okay, so that's the story of how Paradise Pier became Pixar Pier? Is that it? Can I go now?
Yeah, let's see how simple that was. Oh, wait, no, it's not as simple as I said, because there's one more thing to do. How could I have forgotten? I remember at the top of the show, I said, well, there was a question, and now it's time to answer that question.
All right, it's quiz time, kids. All right, Jim, what's the question?
Len, you remember how a few minutes back I mentioned how the Orange Singer made use of Epcot's smellizer technology?
Yes.
Well, they discontinued the use of the citrus smell on this Paradise Pier attraction after just a few weeks. The question is for you guys, why did they do that?
So I've got two theories. The first one is the scent somehow bothered the neighbors who were consuming more orange juice than the rest of California combined. Or I'm going to take a line here from Flick's Fun Fair and say, we're pollinators.
Oh, wow. You did it. What? You get points. You are correct.
It was really bees. Was it bees? I was just making that up.
Real bees?
Real bees. Yeah, it was a flock of bees, a buzzard of bees, a bumble of bees. Lots of bees.
A bumble of bees. All right. So I'm assuming I get something for guessing correctly.
Oh yeah. I almost forgot. You get today and today only a year's supply of slightly used giant fiberglass orange peel. Where should we have that delivered?
Wait a minute. What do I get for not answering the question?
Ooh, for you get our special prize, Mr. Hill. You get a 10-year supply of slightly used giant fiberglass orange peel. Plus, you get to stay behind after class and clap the erasers.
we have a budget for erasers? Oh my God.
Well, we're nothing but the best. And while Mr. Hill gives himself a case of white lung, we now bring this curtain down on season 1 of Disney Unpacked.
That was very informative, Jim. Tell us what's on the next episode of Disney Unpacked.
Ooh, we're busy on that. Busy as bees, actually, but we really haven't decided on the first story for season 2 just yet. But we've got a ton of stories to pick from.
Okay, and with that, we've completed our first season of Disney Unpacked. For Jim Hill, Jim Shull, and me, Len Testa, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Jim Hill here. If you've been enjoying Disney Unpacked on YouTube, be sure and head on over to Patreon and join our community. Not only will you receive the entire Jim Hill Media suite of podcasts ad-free, but you'll also get bonus episodes of the Disney Dish and, more importantly, the full episodes of Disney Unpacked with more stories from Jim Shull, Len Testa, and I. By joining our Patreon, you are helping us continue to evolve our entertainment offerings and are part of the team. We can't wait to show you some of the other ideas we've been working on. And if you haven't yet, be sure and subscribe to Disney Unpacked on YouTube. Thanks for watching and supporting the team at Jim Hill Media and Disney Unpacked.